you do begin to think, do women even like art? Because the way that they talk about it as, burning down the patriarchy, burning down the past or whatever, it's like, I don't know that that's a useful position to take when you're trying to be a creator, right? Like, you can't create from a wholly egotistical place. There's a tradition, there's a history. Not all of it is great, obviously. But you can't just decide, well, I'm not going to pay attention to the masters because they're complicated. I'm not going to, you can't carve that space out of yourself. Like, it's in the history of everything. So to sort of make a pretense of purity and to sort of sneer and criticize rather than get involved and participate and try to make some contribution, I think is a pretty shitty way to look at what you have decided to call your life's work.
Welcome to the New Flesh Podcast, the podcast you deserve. My name is Ricky Allpike, and joining me once again is Jonathan Astro. John, how's it going?
Yeah, good, Ricky. I was just trying to think. I got no complaints. Not really.
That's good. That's good. So today we're talking about monstrous artists and what we do with their work. I mean, I guess that the ultimate example would be someone like Hitler. He was a bit of an artist, wasn't he?
Actually, didn't he go to art school?
He did.
Or wasn't he sort of like a frustrated artist? Wasn't that one of the things?
He was. Yeah, he wanted to be a painter, but I don't think his paintings were very good. I wonder if they exist in a gallery somewhere. Like, surely they're up with a massive disclaimer. The disclaimer is probably bigger than the artwork itself.
Well, this was actually a big ruse. It was a trick that you've proved that you want to see Hitler's artwork.
Yes.
So,
but if there was an exhibition of Hitler's artwork, would you go and see it?
What is this, the Third Degree?
No, it's the Third Reich.
Oh, Ricky, let's move on quick. That's very good. Okay, today we are interviewing Jessa Crispin, a return guest. Jessa is fantastic. Love speaking to her. And one of the things that we come together on is this obsession we have with what to do with monstrous artists, and mostly men. Let's be real, and a few women, and their art, but also monstrous art, I guess, is another side issue of that. But what do you do when Billie Jean comes on at a wedding, or I tell you to watch Crimes and Misdemeanors or whatever,
Yep. Or you feel like revisiting The Cosby Show.
I didn't like it even before all the stuff.
Well, this is the weird thing. I think The Cosby Show sort of passed me by. Like, I'm not quite old enough to have sort of been watching TV at that age to catch it. And then by the time I was watching sitcoms and stuff, it was more like Hanging with Mr.
Cooper. I knew you were going to say Hanging with Mr. Cooper.
Family Matters,
Yes. Yeah. As Norman would say, you're showing everybody how down with the hood that you are. Goodness me. All right, on with the show.
Well, we always tell you the truth here at the New Flesh Podcast, and the truth is that we need your help. We need you to leave us a rating or review wherever you listen to the show. We're also on YouTube, so please subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave a comment there about a show you liked. Word of mouth is also a very powerful tool, so please tell all of your friends. And finally, to our Uber fans, if you love what we do, you can send us a little cash via the Buy Me a Coffee platform. Any donation here is very much appreciated. And now, let's get on with the show.
Return guest Jessa Crispin is the founder and editor of magazines Bookslut.com and Spolia. She's the author of The Dead Ladies Project, The Creative Tarot, and Why I Am Not a Feminist. Her provocative podcast, Public Intellectual, featuring guest interviews with artists and thinkers, ran from 2019 until 2021. Go and check that out. They're all online. She's also penned work for the New York Times, Washington Post, Chicago Times, Sun Times, The Guardian, The Spectator World, blah, blah, blah. And Unheard. Her Substack is called The Culture We Deserve, and you should all be following and supporting her work there. Jessa, welcome back to The New Flesh.
I'm so happy to be a return guest. I'm excited.
Well, Jessa, last time we spoke, I believe you mentioned that you were discovering the sport of soccer. And I can't remember if this was voluntary or not. I think your husband may have had something to do with it. How is your love of the world game going? I'm
not watching it. It's at night. I am in bed, man. I am not staying up until 1 a.m. to watch soccer, unfortunately. Like, I am showing my flimsy attachment here, but it's if there's any inconvenience or discomfort involved, I'm out immediately. So
it's one of those sports. Even here, people who are into that, they've got multiple streaming services. They're up in the middle of the night. It sounds dreadful. Like it sounds like really bad.
That's what my husband is doing while I'm sleeping away. He's having a good time, and me as well, because I'm very well rested right now.
Well, it's a win-win situation then, I guess.
Yes.
So we have some interesting ground to cover today, a detailed discussion of problematic artists and their problematic work, about which you've written a superb piece that everyone can read very soon. So we'll have to talk about the very unproblematic book that you've reviewed, which you've written about, along with some fascinating grabs from your Substack work. But I wanted to cover the financial state of the arts to begin with, which you recently penned an article about, the state of the arts and the finances around that, theatre, film and publishing. You say that it's the middle tier organisations and works that are suffering most, and it's leaving really only the micro level hobbyist and the blockbuster intact. Can you talk more about this?
Yeah, so most of the arts in America is, and publishing is sort of outside of this at the moment, but if we're talking theater, dance, visual art, etc., these are all pretty much run as nonprofits. And these are all primarily grant funded. And as a result of inflation and the cost of living crisis that has been going on for several years, everybody is stretched very thin because the grants have not changed their amount in a very long time. And so you get the same amount of money pretty much every single year, and every year you can do less and less with it. So what's happening is that it is the mid-tier regional arts programs that are unable to compensate for what's been lost. The larger institutions like the Met, they have billionaires on call. They're always going to be able to sort of, meet whatever gaps. The directors of the Met will never take a pay cut if they can help it. But it's everybody else. Tulsa, Oklahoma had to cancel the next season of their opera. It's places like this that are really struggling. And it's because the whole funding system of arts in America is essentially broken. We rely on these nonprofits, which are incredibly inefficient and also very particular in the kind of art they think is important to fund. And as a result, we have a very sort of bland artistic culture in the United States at the moment.
How would you characterize what they select to fund and the candidates they prefer?
Well, for the last 10 years, I would say it's the idea that art has a social purpose, a progressive social purpose, has been very dominant. So that's how you get your grant application funded, is if you say we're doing diversity outreach, we are working with underprivileged demographics, we're, et cetera, or we are presenting material from a rediscovered, underappreciated woman playwright or whatever. And that is essentially how you get funded, and anything that falls out that can't be described in that way. And of course, the reason why development directors make the big bucks in nonprofits in the United States is because they can make anything sound like social progress. You're not going to get the big grants. You're not going to get the Guggenheim. You're not going to get, whatever. So that's kind of the problem, is we have a lot of sort of mushy, wishy-washy, Hamilton-esque works in production. And these are blockbusters. They make a ton of money. And so there's also that element of, theater companies that are stretched financially are going to go with the formula that works for them. And the formula that works right now is Hamilton. And a lot of things sort of like fall, or like, you know, a re-diversified casting of an old work. These are things that kind of have an automatic hook with an audience, an upper middle class audience that wants to feel like if they're going out for the evening, it's not decadence, it's, you know, they're contributing to something. And that's really who goes to theatrical productions in the United States right now.
One of the grotesque workarounds that they've been doing in Melbourne, I might as well name and shame, that the Malthouse Theatre, which is a fairly famous theatre, but they do it at a few of them. They get a sort of a beloved highbrow piece of cinema like Solaris or a Bergman film or something like that, and then they just go to town on it. So it's a way of, as you say, hooking people in. They've got a pre-existing work that also comes from, they forget the fact that all of those works were original, that they were dangerous and experimental, and all of that's now gone. And so where they put their effort is they like, I went to see a version of Solaris, which, you guessed it, I'm fairly certain that it was gender swapped, that the lead person was a woman. Like, you know, of course it was. I mean, it was like this is where they put their time. But is this kind of workaround you've seen popping up?
Well, this is the culture of the gimmick, right? And you have to create a sense of urgency, in particularly because since the pandemic, people just haven't gone back to the high arts. The audience numbers for symphonies are down, opera is down, theater is down. Live performance in any sort of, you know, above a rock club is really struggling right now to retain an audience. And so if you do a gimmick, like, you know, a gender swap or something like that, here in Philadelphia, they did La Boheme backwards. And it added nothing. It added absolutely nothing. It was absolute garbage. It totally ruined the opera, but it was packed because, you know, people have seen La Boheme. If you're going to see an opera, you have seen La Boheme, right? Because it's one of, you know, the top 5 that even people who aren't that interested in opera, they know about it. So in order to create a sense of urgency to buy tickets for another production of La Boheme, you have to throw in a gimmick, which is we're going to do it backwards. So I think ultimately the gender swapping, the race blind casting, these kinds of things, this is just part of a larger culture of the gimmick. And these are the things that sort of work at the moment, but are ultimately going to lead to, I think, audience loss because, yeah, I saw La Boheme backwards. It sucked. Like, I'm not going to go back to, you know, if they do Carmen backwards, like, I'm not falling for that again.
Well, you mentioned audience loss there. Like, do you think they're sort of getting wise to these sorts of gimmicks? Like we recently spoke to Heather McDonald, and she mentioned that I think it was the entire 2021-2022 Broadway season was populated by shows that were written by people of color. Like, do you think audiences are seeing that and going, well, you know, what's the deal here? Like, you know, isn't it obvious that what you know, you're trying to push some sort of agenda on me, or yeah, using the gimmicks just to get me in?
I don't think it's that. I think because, you know, if you look at the Met in New York, their opera season last year, the highest attendance rates were for the new operas by previously neglected composers. So they did an opera called, I think it's just called The Boxer, by a Black composer. And it was a sensation. Like, everyone loved it. And it wasn't just like the gimmick of it, although certainly that works in ad campaigns and so on. But actually, it turned out to be a really good show. Like, they really put a lot of heart into it. And so it's actually the things that kind of aren't working are the trying to dress up the repertoire, like the old stuff that they're trying to redo in a gimmicky way or whatever. I think people want to see a good show. And I think ultimately, you know, opera companies have, especially in the United States, relied and I think this is, for theater as well, and symphonies, they've relied too much on the hits, which is pleasing to an audience that is aging rapidly. And a newer generation is interested in different things. And this is the first time that a lot of these companies have had to really pivot in a while. And I think they're trying a lot of stupid ideas out until they'll figure something out. Something will work, and then they'll be like, okay, but a lot of companies aren't going to survive this process of experimentation. People are running out of money, et cetera. So it'll probably be the Met that survives, and, Tulsa that gets fucked.
Well, do you think we have a responsibility to stay truthful to a work of art? And I know John mentioned the Malthouse Theatre. Now, I know a couple of years ago they did a one-woman play, and it was based on the novel Wake in Fright, which is like a classic Australian novel, which I'm not sure if you know about it, but it's basically about male drinking culture in the outback. And it was a one-woman show, and it was such a... Yeah, of course it was, but it was such a betrayal of the original work that you may as well just write a new work. Don't do Wake and Fright. Do a one-woman show that's maybe about drinking culture that is not Wake and Fright. I mean, do we have a responsibility to these great works of art?
I think that a great work of art can survive experimentation, but obviously not every idea. I mean, especially if it's coming from a place of the gimmick or I'm going to deconstruct this, or I'm not coming to it from a sincere place, right? And you can see that kind of thing happening a lot in our culture. Like, I am going to only talk about this in my sarcastic voice. So everyone knows that I don't actually approve of Hemingway or whatever. Like, if you come to it with sincerity, you can do a lot. I mean, I remember when I was living in Berlin, the Komische Opera was constantly doing like wild, weird shit with 18th century operas. It was just like, yeah, everyone's a woman now. And then for whatever reason, everyone's a woman. Someone is in a cod piece and they're humping everybody else and say, like, it can be, if it's taken with a sort of light heart and with sincerity, be really rewarding. But we do not have a culture of sincerity, right? We don't have a lot of performers, directors, writers who are coming to the history of art from a place of sincerity. They're coming with it with like, here's my big ego, or I'm going to burn down the patriarchy, or whatever. But a work of art, you can tear it apart, you can remix it, you can. Maybe if somebody actually knew what they were doing, you can run it backwards. But because the truth of the piece is still going to be there, next year, even if this year the production of it sucks.
Well, you've written in this article that we'll get into in a bit more detail shortly. This great quote that I think pertains to this in a way. You say, quote, "Our understanding of art has been thoroughly complicated by activism," close quote. What are your thoughts here? I mean, this feeds into this idea of coming to a work with something other than sincerity or authenticity.
Right. So the thing I was writing about was the Hannah Gadsby, it's Pablo-Matic show at the Brooklyn Museum. I don't know if you guys have caught that discourse quite as much as the Americans have, but essentially the first half of the show is Picasso work with Hannah Gadsby doing the wall text, which are jokes, like a punchline about whatever it is we're seeing on in the Picasso, and they're not good jokes. The point of them is just to sort of poke you in the side and get on your nerves, and I think it's childish, and I think it's very silly. I think if you spend more than 5 minutes in a room of Picassos, you can move past whatever discomfort, I would hope, move past whatever sort of biographical discomfort you have and start to think about the work itself. I thought it was one of the worst things that I'd ever seen was this show. I thought it was so disrespectful to the women artists who were included around it to be in the same like space as Hannah Gadsby, like making dick jokes. And if you're gonna sort of position the work of women artists in a way that takes them seriously, like and treats them as if they were artists in their own right and not lesser than the male genius, then why are you doing it like this? Like this is so degrading. So it was very upsetting. I was very angry. I was texting all my friends while I was in there. And
was this a popular show? Did a lot of people go to this? It's Pablo-Matic, I think.
It was very popular, and I think a lot of it was gawking at the big crash. Because it got terrible reviews. And so I think then once there was a round of awful reviews of saying this is shit, this is stupid, why are we still talking about art this way? Then people wanted to see what all the fuss was about, which I understand that because that's why I was there too. But at the same time, like then it lets the Brooklyn Museum convince themselves that this is a hit, right? Like once you give a person money for doing something fucking stupid, they're going to do that stupid thing again and again and again because it makes them money. So I think we're probably in for another 10 years of garbage.
Well, you pose a provocative question in your article, which we have to talk about. And the question is, do women even like art?
Yeah.
So what have you got to say about this question?
Yeah, I mean, it's just something that I keep thinking, do women even like art? Because I had read Monsters by Claire Dederer, and I had read a couple other books like that, which is sort of taking a critical stance against the male genius artist who abuses women or abuses his power in some way, right? And we've had so much of that for now 10 years. And we've had this almost exclusively coming out of the feminist space. So you do begin to think, do women even like art? Because the way that they talk about it as, burning down the patriarchy, burning down the past or whatever, it's like, I don't know that that's a useful position to take when you're trying to be a creator, right? Like you can't create from a wholly egotistical place. There's a tradition, there's a history. Not all of it is great, obviously, but you can't just decide. Well, I'm not going to pay attention to the masters because they're complicated. I'm not going to, you can't carve that space out of yourself. Like it's in the history of everything. So to sort of make a pretense of purity, and to sort of sneer and criticize rather than get involved and participate and try to make some contribution, I think is a pretty shitty way to look at what you have decided to call your life's work. Like, if you're just going to shit on other writers, just because they're men, just because, something happened, like, what are you contributing other than just your sneer and your arrogance? Like, this is not useful to us. And it seems like so many women writers and artists and musicians and everything have gotten stuck in this space of like condemnation and critique. And it's boring. It's so boring. I don't know if you guys read the Claire Dederer book. Did you guys read the Claire Dederer book?
Yes, I'm over halfway, and I got to tell you, Jessa, it's tough. It's a tough read.
It is tough. Yeah. Yes, it is.
And I'm not talking about the prose. Like it is written like a blog post. It's in these short fragments. I got so much to say. Firstly, I want to say that I'm in awe and I admire anyone who's written a book. I paid for this book, and let's get that out of the way because I don't want to just make it a slam session. Although I do want to slam this book. Like this is staggering. I mean, I got to get your ideas. So, I mean, what did you make of her list of targets? So it appears to be Woody Allen gets a chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Roman Polanski, I think she does dip into Michael Jackson a little bit at the beginning. Picasso, Wagner. She throws in J.K. Rowling as a bonus, I think.
Yeah.
Which I mean, this is an eclectic bunch, don't you think?
Well, I think probably some of those were pressed upon her by an editor of some kind to be like, this is getting repetitive, because you can tell who she cares about and who she doesn't care about, because the chapters about Woody Allen, Polanski, Cosby, and so on are very passionate and detailed. And Wagner, no, I don't think she doesn't even make it clear that she's ever seen a Wagner opera or listened to his music at all. So she has this sort of investment in certain figures because they have harmed people that resemble her in that they are women. And so she wants to think about violence against women, but she wants to think about, she wants to pretend to be thinking about evil in a general way. But her heart's not and brain, isn't in it. And so those sections that aren't about violence against women are really lacking. I also want to make it clear that the sections about violence against women are also not great. But at least there's some engagement with the issues. I guess we should just for people who haven't read it, just say it's like a collection of essays about artists who have done bad things, essentially. But
it's a fascinating topic that we're all three of us are interested in, because it's what an interesting philosophical problem, probably as old as the hills, but in that how do we process the work, often the great work, we don't care if they've done shitty work, the great work of bad people or people who've done bad actions, and there's so many interesting philosophical quandaries and possibilities there, and that are so interesting for us as humans, and to me this came across as really fingernail deep analysis. Firstly, I don't know what you think. It had a decided lack of rigor. It was like the opposite of Norman Finkelstein.
Yeah.
In fact, we need Norman Finkelstein to cover this topic. Actually, he wouldn't care about it.
Don't bother him.
He wouldn't care. He'd say, let's cut the shit. Let's get serious. He would say, forget this crap. But I also found, I mean, what did you think of her? Firstly, she brought in her biographical details about her own life, but then trying to attach the moment, this sort of pussy hat, Harvey Weinstein, Me Too moment, Trump gets
she mentions Trump.
But this book seemed also like she'd been in a bomb shelter since 2017 as well. Like nothing had happened since then, because no one in her life read this and said, hey, this seems like, because even The Guardian jumped off her. I read an article, seriously, a review by The Guardian where they were like, and I was like, wow, when The Guardian run out on you on something like this, you're in trouble.
Yeah. I mean, well, this is, as you say, it is a subject as old as the hills. And I think that's what is so frustrating about the book, and why it sort of fits into this idea of having only a sneer to contribute to the thing that you say you're devoted to, is that she didn't do any work. Like she says specifically in the book, I can't think of anyone who's written on this subject. I was like, I mean, she's writing about Wagner. How many fucking books have been written about Wagner's anti-Semitism? How many fucking PhD dissertations, just an absolute library has been written about Wagner, about Eliot, about Pound, and her inability to take any of that seriously is really kind of staggering to me as a writer. It's just like, if you're not up for this, why are you doing? Like, if you're not up for it, if you're not going to wade in to this messy topic, like really prepared and really invigorated, then why are you doing it? Because it's just so lazy, and also really such an insult to the people who have thought about this for centuries now. It's so weird. It's such a weird approach to take in what's supposed to be an intellectual work, right?
What do you think the actual motivations are? I mean, this is speculation, but there are, this is sort of like a trend, a sort of a mode of modern criticism that focuses on artists' life transgressions rather than the art itself. I mean, do you have any idea of what the ultimate motivation is for someone like this? I mean, is it to elevate her own art? Is it to get her own book deal? Is it to try and push down the supposed genius of some artists so that, someone like her might then, enter into that genius status somehow,
Yeah, I mean, for her, I'm assuming it's the book deal. I think, for the people who have worked in this area for a long time, it is, how do I make space, or how does anybody make space for themselves in a field of art, or whatever your profession is, that is against us, that is not used to accommodating us, that is hostile and violent to us, etc. Like, a woman artist has to go into a space that is actively trying to push her out. And I think that's been true up until, a decade ago, really, right? 4 centuries, millennia, up until about a decade ago. If you sort of try to claim a space in this realm, you got the shit kicked out of you, and it didn't want you there, and etc. So people have been thinking, and not just women, but obviously people of different races and sexualities and everything else, have been thinking about how do I fit into this, and do I? And that's important work, right? And some of that is, why is certain behavior allowed and other behavior is not allowed? Oh, because it's convenient to the powers that be. If the genius, helps push the woman out by punching her in the face or raping her or whatever, like, that's just part of the ecosystem that doesn't want women in it, right? So I respect absolutely everybody who's had to try to figure that out for themselves, except for when they've done it in a state of self-aggrandizement. I'm not saying that right. Whatever, it's late here. Or in a state of publicity, right? And sneering. I think there is a time to be in a activist mode and to scream and shout and exaggerate when no one is paying attention to you. If nobody is acknowledging that rape and violence is going on, it is perfectly acceptable to scream your fucking head off about it, right? But once people are looking at you, you have to pivot. You have to take a different tone, because otherwise it's counterproductive. You can't be activist in a space that is actually including you in the same way, right? So I think this book is dumb. I think it's not. I think she does, whatever. I'm not going to speculate on who she. Whatever. I'm trying to keep the inside things inside. But I do think there's still a need for some of these conversations to be happening, and that's why I get angry when the space that is ready for that conversation is filled with something like this. that doesn't take it seriously, and is really just trying to make a scene for themselves.
Now, I haven't read the book, and John has shared a lot of quotes with me over the past couple of weeks, so I sort of have a sense of it, and it just seems so, like John said, it's the opposite of Norman Finkelstein. Like, it doesn't seem very academically rigorous, and she hasn't picked a particular time period or a particular, sort of school of art or something like that. It's just this scattergun approach to sort of, just picked, seemingly at random, these
Woody Allen, Bill Cosby, Floyd Mayweather, and Wagner, and you just go, wait a minute, they're all sort of different guys at different times and different causes and conditions, and they might have a little bit in common, I guess.
And she doesn't try to contextualize it in the time at all, right? She doesn't try to say,
Caravaggio
what it was like for
Wagner.
Right. She doesn't talk about what it was like for him or any of these people. It's just she's responding to it as if not just that it happened today, but as if it happened to her. And so she has sort of selected herself to be the arbiter of whether this is a good person or a bad person. And the language that she used, like she's constantly saying things like, I took this rape very personally. I was like, but isn't that inappropriate? It's inappropriate to decide. And in one of the cases, she talks about David Bowie sleeping with a teenager. And the teenager herself has said, I had a great time. I don't know why everyone's why is everyone freaking out about this? But Claire has decided that she gets to be the person who declares that rape, right? She gets to put it in the written record that this woman was raped. Despite what the woman's own experience is, Claire's is the one that's publishing a book from a major press that is putting in the written record that David Bowie was a rapist. And that's so inappropriate. And there doesn't seem to be a moment of humility in any part of the book where she reflects on, is this something I should be doing? Like, should I be the one to say these things? She really doesn't. She just barrels through and is like, because I had a good relationship with my stepfather, then Woody Allen's relationship with Soon-Yi is like even worse now. And it's just like, why do you think you get to decide? It's so arrogant.
Yeah, but yes, and she seems so certain of these
oh yeah,
things
she's
as well. Like,
very certain.
I think we might be a little less harsh on the book if she did doubt herself throughout the book, because it is a tricky topic. What do we make of, the artwork of people who have had monstrous personal lives? I mean, that is an interesting question. And unfortunately, she's taken it in a pretty dumb direction. Now, John, you need to ask about Woody Allen.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So now, Jessa, look, I know that Woody Allen's not for everyone. Okay. But he is for me. And there's a couple of things. So, I mean, firstly, I'd like, to get your thoughts on her quote. She says, "I took the fucking of Soon-Yi as a terrible betrayal of me personally."
Yeah.
I particularly like the use of the word "fucking" here. I think it sounds like to me like a great album name, "The Fucking of Soon-Yi." But I mean, did you take it personally?
When Woody Allen fucks Soon-Yi, no, I don't really remember. I don't really remember that as a cultural event that was important to me as a teenager. Like, I had boyfriends that were like, we're watching this Woody Allen film, and then you're just like, great. But I personally only really like 2 of his movies, and the rest I'm like,
Which 2? May I ask?
Annie Hall and Bullets Over Broadway. I'm very basic.
Great film.
But oh yeah, they're good. but it wasn't somebody that I cared about, and also I just didn't feel like it was anything worse than what any woman has experienced. Like being physically embodied in the 21st century, like, or I guess it happened in the 20th, but you know what I mean? Like, we have other things to worry about than the sex life of Woody Allen. I would hope, right? Like, can we maybe, like nudge our eyes in a different direction and maybe
Well,
think
what do
about
you
something?
think about the idea that in this space there is, like with all the people we mentioned, all their cases are wildly different, in terms of intensity, whether they literally broke the law or not, or
Right.
whether it was just morally repugnant, or whether it was a bad look, or
Right.
whether
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
or whether
Or
it's
criminal. Yeah.
or criminal, or whether it's she doesn't mention the fact that these are all like entertainers, Hollywood. I mean, you had a great quote in our last discussion. You said that art used to be a place for people who weren't good at life to go, and so that understanding is not taken into it. Like Woody Allen is, his case is quite interesting. It's a few things, because the reason I'm going on about it is because I do love his work. And recently I brought it up. I was at a talk and it was all going smashingly. And then I brought up, people said, "Oh, name something about yourself that, people wouldn't know." And I said, "Well, I really, it was a private thing." I said, "I like Woody Allen, and I think that Mia Farrow's a liar, and I think that Ronan, I think that Ronan Farrow's a grifter, and that Dylan was groomed by the mum."
How did that go?
And it did not go well, and people but then it was the usual grab bag of stuff. So people go, "Well, yeah, he's a pedophile. He diddled his kids," and then they go to that. It's the whole suite. They say, Soon Yi, and then it's the final one is always like, "And just check out Manhattan. It's all there. It's all there. He's with a young chick in that. It's all sewn up, mate. Like there it is. He's always with young chicks. Like he was telling us, like any good dictator, telling us what he wanted to do, and then he did it. And you just go, all right, it's a lot. It's a lot going on there." So I don't know. I find that particular case is emblematic of the kind of conflation of everything. Like everyone just creates a ball of horror.
Well, I just remembered there's a third film that I like, which is Hannah and Her Sisters. I think is really great. But to sort of, I think ultimately my problem with this book and with discussions of this nature of like, is this person a good person or a bad person, and what should happen to them, should they be banished from polite society, et cetera, is that ultimately what we're talking about is a societal problem. We have a society that has historically punished and brutalized and et cetera women, right? And so people within this society, because it's seen as being sort of natural and normal and an okay thing to do, participate in that. And for whatever reason, we've decided to fix this by just going after each individual who is really just sort of acting out a societal problem. And that doesn't mean I don't think that people who actually commit acts of violence should be arrested and go through the judicial system and et cetera. But Claire Dederer's book is essentially saying, the power is within the individual consumer to decide. How useful is that, right? She's talking about, without ever mentioning it directly, that this is a problem with basically the entire power structure of the world for the history of the written, civilization. This has been a problem in various levels and intensities. And what we should do is just boycott the ones that are bad now. Like, it's so infuriating and so diminishing and so ineffective that I honestly don't know why people want to hear that message of just like, yeah, just ignore it. Just like, don't watch those movies and, don't give money to these particular people, and just bring it up at every moment possible that this person is a bad person and the world will magically get better. Like that's not how this shit works, bitch.
But don't you think also it's such a disappointing misunderstanding of how complex of the wonderful complexity of humans. Like, we are capable of it all, and this woman seems, because she's just representative of a train of thought out there that has this sort of black and white view of things. And I'm like, well, that's why I like Michael Haneke movies, where, like, The Piano Teacher, where she'll just, she teaches piano in this movie, and like there's a really great student.
I know the piano teacher.
Yeah, I know you do. I'm explaining to the listener who might not know. They should watch it. But there's a great scene where she smashes up glass and just puts it in like this brilliant student's pocket,
Yeah.
and this character, not spoiler alert, is not punished at all. In fact, triumphs, and we feel good about her triumph at the end of her. In a way, I do, certainly.
She stabbed herself in the chest, man. Like, I don't know if we feel great about her triumph.
Well, if she gets away from her mum and stuff, well, we could argue about feeling great about it. Great's the wrong word, but I feel if we're talking about positive and negative charges, at the end, I'm not all in the negative. Just saying, well, crime doesn't pay. Like at the end, it's a bit more complex than that, And so when we break it down like this, like, don't you want to be in the situation where, like, we want this? We're going to sound like pigs saying this, but I want to read the book where the person like outlines all of the horrible things that someone did, and then says, and I love him anyway. Or like, or part of me loves it. And you just go, oh, yes. And you just go, yes, I know. It's like that quote from Peter Sellers. He says, I look around the room and I see the woman who's like the most poisonous for me. And then I go after her, and you go, yes, I get it. I get it. Very human.
Yeah. I think that we are always going to, as long as we're in this mode of like focused on the individual and determining if they're bad or good, right? We're always going to be resistant to any sort of complexity. And the artwork is going to be dumb and shallow and silly and all the rest of it, because it doesn't get at the heart of why people are fucked up. And there are a lot of reasons why people are fucked up. I've been reading a lot of Norman Mailer the last couple of years, and I have come to see him as an object of pity, because I think a lot of his work is brilliant and absolutely is like worth still reading, preserving, talking about, thinking about, etc. But there are moments when his racism and when his misogyny like is on the page in a really ugly, stupid way. Like, it makes him stupid that he can't sort of see around this obvious block that he has with just refusing to see certain people as fully human. He's just like, no, and he's blind to it, and he never sort of gets it in the history of his work. And so you kind of feel bad for him that he was sort of carrying around this darkness, and that there was just part of his intellect that just wasn't capable of getting into it and around it. Like, because it really damages a lot of the material that he's working with. And you're just like, oh, this poor dumb guy. Like, yeah, it's, the problem of him stabbing his wife and almost killing her that's not an artistic problem. That's a criminal problem, right? And I think because for so long, Norman Mailer's biographies and the work about him was very willing to just overlook that this ever happened. Or in some cases, they blamed his wife for the incident, saying, oh, she shouldn't have been nagging him, whatever. Fuck you. because of that, it's reasonable to scream about, he stabbed his fucking wife and almost killed her. But once it's incorporated into the biography, once everybody knows about it, like once you can start to see it in the work and engage with it in that level, that's interesting, but you have to stop fucking screaming about it. Like there are other ways to talk about this and engage with what he's doing. And just sort of like yelling he stabbed his wife it's not adding anything to the intellectual conversation.
I can think of a couple of things. Like, shouldn't we be trying to create, as I think you've already just kind of said it, but shouldn't we be trying to create a new piece of work that is befitting of this complex idea? So, for example, one of the people she goes after, Claire Dederer goes after in a book, I think she mentions William Burroughs, who did a similar sort of mad thing with his wife. Now, rather than going on about making it a court case where we just read out like, who did what to who, why don't you do what Cronenberg, a real artist, did in The Naked Lunch and incorporate that into the man's work, put it in the story, and have these indelible scenes. Get Judy Davis to play the scene. She puts the apple on her head or whatever, and it's weird and upsetting, and it's this new thing. It's not, and we're confused, and we're in the cafe afterwards talking about like, what does it even mean? It's dazzling, like the way it goes in on itself about the author and, this being incorporated into his work and Cronenberg's role in that. It becomes this dizzying thing because you don't know. It's not just Cronenberg waggling the finger saying, "Oh, he shouldn't have done that naughty thing to his wife," and you go, "Yeah,
no, it's really, I think it's laziness as part of it. Is just like, I think as much as, Norman Mailer had a block about how he thought about women, I think a lot of writers have this block about how you think about men, right? A lot of women writers do. Because, part of the process of like becoming political about the way, the treatment of women and the political position of women or whatever is it's upsetting, right? It is upsetting to hold this information in your head about people that you love, including, not just writers, but people in your life, have participated in this and have done terrible things. And, I'm only alive because my great-grandmother survived the attempt on her life that my great-grandfather made on her, right? Like that's the only, if he had succeeded, I would not exist. So it's something that's in all of our histories and it's upsetting and it creates this big knot in your brain, but it is your job if you're a writer or an intellectual in any way to try to engage with it and come up with something other than, a shouty slogan or, like a book of essays that ultimately doesn't say anything about the subject in which you've, taken on. So it's frustrating to me because the stakes of this are high. And it's an important subject, and it's a conversation that we need to be having on a lot of different levels, not just about women, but because it's sort of like stuck in this one place of just sort of shouting about it, nothing progressives, nothing improves. Women use this as a way of dehumanizing other people as well. A lot of feminists that are sort of stuck in this mode then go on to dehumanize trans women or immigrants because they're, protect our borders because the rapists are coming in and, all this sort of other rhetoric that comes out of this sort of fixation on women's safety and so on. It's just so... It's a problem that we haven't moved on, that we haven't been able to have a real conversation about this.
Yeah, when I read critiques like this, it almost makes you think that bad male behavior is only exclusive to the art world, whereas it's
right, yeah,
everywhere,
Yeah.
And I don't think this particular book recognizes that in any way, and it also doesn't recognize your idea that the art world is a place where misfits and people who are not good at life used to gravitate towards, Um, Sort of on a similar topic, I'd like to get your take on a Heather McDonald quote that I've heard her say, and I'm not sure if it's hers or whether she's just sort of restating it, but it's about genius. And she said that the reason there's no female Mozart is the same reason we don't have a female Jack the Ripper. And throughout history, we've had men that are so obsessed by their art that they're willing to literally throw their lives away, like neglect their health, neglect their families, or have no families at all in pursuit of their art. I mean, do you think there's something in that parallel?
I think there are a lot of reasons why we haven't had a female Mozart. I mean, if you want to sort of like go back to the Linda Nochlin essay, why have there been no great women artists? Part of it is just you need access to material resources in order to become an artist. Now we have that. We have access. Women can get educated, they can get hired, etc., within art institutions. But now we don't have a culture that takes art seriously in the way that they did in Mozart's era, right? We don't have kings who have their little pet composers who are on staff and et cetera. Like, we just don't have a culture that really prizes good art at the moment. And so that's a hindrance as well. I think that there have been women writers, artists, et cetera, throughout time who do have a crazed devotion to their work. But it takes more than that. It takes, again, material resources. It takes a sort of recognition by the culture at large that what you're doing is worthwhile and you shouldn't go drown yourself in the river. There are a lot of elements at play into what sort of creates a moment of artistic flourishing. And we don't, in our culture right now, have a lot of those things. We just, by large, just don't have a populace that gives a shit about great music anymore.
Well, how do you think we can elevate the status of art again so that we may have a female Mozart?
I am insanely writing an essay on this very subject. But, sort of trying to track down why we're in a sort of cultural dead zone right now. And I think we need to get the people with college degrees the fuck out of art, right? We have to, I think that's the absolutely top priority, is get those motherfuckers who could work in finance, get them into finance, get them out of art. I don't want to see any more art by good little students who really enjoyed their time at Harvard. Like, I'm so over it. Well-behaved art by well-behaved people. Fuck all of them. Out.
Jessa, it's interesting you say that. I think I've mentioned it a few times in this podcast that several decades ago, if you were an artist or an actor or a musician or a filmmaker, you didn't go to college to learn those things. Whereas all of those disciplines now, you get funneled through the university system. I mean, I kind of crave to see those actors again, like are featured in the Carry On films, that come from a working class background. I mean, where are the working class actors? Where are the working class artists, painters, musicians? I mean, I couldn't think of any off the top of my head.
They're fucking dead from opioid addiction, right? I mean, we don't have anything that would allow us to even see the work of people who would just one generation ago have been, or not one, like two generations ago, 3 generations ago, the prime artist demographic, right? We don't in any way allow them to even think for a moment that this world wants them in it. Like, it's so disgusting to me. And I find it very upsetting because, you know, I mean, I was sort of raised in a family that, you know, didn't give a shit about art, like never read fiction, you know, only saw movies if it had a happy ending or was about the Civil War. Like, and so I had, you know, I really had to fight to, you know, the first time I went to, you know, an art museum was when I was 19. So I really had to sort of fight to create a space for myself. And I had to fight like the disinterest of my surroundings, which is, you know, sort of a farm community. I really didn't think that once I got out of there, I was going to have to fight all the fuckers with advanced degrees as well. So there's that.
But interestingly, Jessa, like the rot is significant because now, particularly after 2016, and like in my life right now, there was a time when all we used to talk about was movies and books. And like when I say movies, cinema and books and good art, you know. And now all we talk about is politics, and all the people I know, this is everyone I associate with every day. All we do is talk about politics, and it's killing me. It is just killing me inside. Like there is no, there's not enough discussion of great works of art, and just the blank looks I get when I bring up a piece of art, like a really great artist or whatever. People just go, yeah. Anyway, about the 2024 presidential run, and you just go,
yeah.
What the fuck
or
are we
what does
talking
this
about?
movie say about, you know, the politics of et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, everything including art has to be understood in that context.
I know some people who, if you bring up anyone, they'll just say, like you would just mention, oh yeah, I want to hold her hand by the Beatles, and they'll go, anyway, you know, one of those guys like beat his wife or something, and you go, yeah, okay, yep. So that's again, conversation killer, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think I said this last time, you know, people don't like to think, and thinking is difficult and stressful. And so people find ways of not thinking, and they find excuses to not think about something. And, you know, saying that this, et cetera, you know, whatever movie writer, whatever, has bad politics is just a way of not, I don't have to think about this. And so like, I can just sort of remove it from my mind. And that's it. Like, that's kind of the key to all of it, is just, that's the person who's just not thinking. And so then you don't have to think about them because, you know, that's it. Like,
well, Jess, we want to give you the final word. So we talked about some interesting stuff today. I think way more interesting than the book about the subject. but you know, how do you keep the dream alive? You know, how do you keep the pulse, the flame going in the face of all this this horror in terms of art and expression?
Because this is the only stuff that matters to me. Like, you know, this is to me it. When I, you know, when I go to the opera house and I'm, you know, you use the basement restroom and you can hear the orchestra on the other side tuning their instruments, like I feel magic. This is the only thing that matters to me. I'm not saying it's the only thing that matters, but it's the only thing that matters to me. So personally, I am going to continue to stomp my feet about it and write about it and devote myself to it, because to me, it's the most possibly rewarding thing ever, is just to, you know, surrender myself to the experience on a stage, as long as it's worth it, right? Like, not everyone's giving back. Not everyone who takes the stage is giving back to the audience, but when it's reciprocated, and, you know, then it's the best thing that you can possibly feel for me. And that's it. So I'll go see, even if the world is ending, I'll just, I'll go see a Verdi in the opera house and, die there. It's fine.
Backwards,
oh my God. I would start throwing my shoes. It's like, if this is the last shit I'm going to see before the world ends, better do it fucking in the right way. Anyway.
Well, before the world ends, how can people follow you? Are you on social media?
Oh, I'm kind of off. Well, Twitter's burning. It's X now, but I am at the Substack, The Culture We Deserve, all one word, .substack.com, and that's the general place right now.
Yes, I wondered why you were so happy, because you're not on social media much, and that I'm jealous. I'm actually jealous.
You should get off of there. It's not good for you.
I get it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming back on the show, Jessa.
Oh, of course. Anytime.
All right. Until next time. Thanks, Jessa.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the New Flesh podcast. If you like our work, please consider rating us on Apple Podcasts or even writing us a review. It really does help the show reach a wider audience. We'll be back with another episode next week. Until then, long live the New Flesh.